So we going live. Got Charles Bishop working on the radio intro. He's playing with him a little bit over there, so we might have to tease you and bring it back to you. But this is Dr. Cavil inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, presented by Amber Slaughter, the project architect. Amber Slaughter, the project architect, where they handle the project planning, project development, project execution, the team management, so you can run your business. Contact Amber Slaughter, the project architect, www.theprojectarchitect.com to schedule an appointment. That is www.theprojectarchitect.com. So welcome and thanks for joining us inside Studio Lecture Hall, the HBCU Sports Lab, for the only weekly sports talk radio show that is dedicated to exploring the sporting HBCU diaspora, including the marching sport with its unique HBCU culture identity, the teams, coaches, athletic directors, commissioners, provost, presidents, big rivalry matchups, classic games, homecoming events, and much, much more of the HBCU athletic aesthetic. As we merge our lecture with sport business practices in the competitive sports industry, the show seeks to provide innovative, progressive, and informative dialogue about the week's HBCU sporting events, issues, and ideas from a fan's perspective. We review the Southwestern Athletic Conference, better known as the SWAC, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, better known as the MEAC, of the NCAA Division I, Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, SIAC, Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association, the CIAA, of the NCAA Division II, Gulf Coast Athletic Conference, GCAC, of the NAIA, and independent programs such as Tennessee State of the OVC, Hampton of the
Big South,
Langston of the Sooner Athletic Conference, as they are in the, as well as Texas College, as an affiliate member of the SAC, as well as Edward Waters as they transition from NAIA to NCAA Division II and membership in the SIAC. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, a.k.a. the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports. I'm excited to bring you this fourth week edition, if you would, in the winter months, as we're hot and heavy in basketball. Had some big matchups this past weekend, but I guess it means you have some HBCU news of the day that you want to give.
Yeah, we'll start out here with the SWAC Men's Basketball Player of the Week, and this was from Alcorn State forward Deshaun Andrews. He's been named SWAC Men's Basketball Player of the Week following Alcorn's 2-0 week on the road. He averaged 24 points in both games. Then Alcorn's win over Mississippi Valley, 105-73, and also a convincing win over UAPB, 82-54. The York, South Carolina native turned in a career night against the Golden Lions, 30 points. This came after 18-point night against Mississippi Valley. Deshaun was 9 of 12 point range in the two games, and 9 of 10 from the free throw line, shooting 65% from the field. So Alcorn, they kind of got it rolling, Doc. They've won 3 in a row, and we've seen Alcorn up close. They once they get going for 3-point line.
Oh, you can. You out of luck.
Yeah.
You better have some defense coming somewhere. And I don't know if we have one of those just defensive units this year. I think Texas Southern, the game they played Prairie View, showed you a little bit about what maybe they can do, and we'll see that on the regular. You saw it a little bit against Jackson State in terms of how they just seemed to totally shut them down.
Yeah.
But outside, in terms of Prairie View, obviously solid. They still bring a lot of the energy and create some turnovers, but it's not quite like what you saw last year. The depth that they do it, the guard play is still good, but in terms of like rebounding from the guard position, you can see that has changed a little bit.
Right.
But it looks like at this point, I mean, I know it's early, and so, but generally speaking, after 4 weeks, you get a third of the season, if you would.
Yeah.
About to get in that halfway mark. It looks like the two teams at the top of the SWAC on the men's side are none other than the Texas schools, Prairie View and Texas Southern. Not the same on the women's side. Got some updates in terms of what's going on the women's side?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to broadcast the Jackson State and Texas Southern game Saturday night. And let me tell you, that was a barn burner. The game went into overtime. And it was just a tremendous atmosphere in Jackson in terms of that game. Jackson State, they were able to go 2-0 over the weekend. They now are 6-0 on the women's side of the ledger in SWAC play. First time in school history they have started out 6-0.
You sound like you're a little excited, man.
I'm pretty excited. Pretty excited. Tamika Reed has that program going in the right direction.
No doubt about it.
And got an opportunity to talk with her.
You said keep your eyes on them.
I think
I thought maybe it was a little bit of blue in your heart.
Yeah, I know.
But no, it's the professional side of Charleston. No, that's for that's pretty good team.
I think the guard play kind of matches what they do inside now. So and they can hurt you from inside. They have a Williams 6'5", and they can toss it into her, and they can get easy buckets. So
thanks for Jackson State putting that on. I was able to watch the game, and you talking about just an exciting back and forth. Lead changes, overtime, big plays. Tough night for both teams at the free throw, but clutch ones at the end for Jackson State. So a really well-played, hard-fought game that really could have went either way. But kudos for Jackson State for finding a way to get it done, particularly being at home, because you do have the rematch where you got to go on the road. So you want to get it done at home, undefeated, found a way, surging, if you would, Prairie team, getting a big win over Grambling, letting know that Grambling is transitioning.
Life without Shekyla Hill.
Which is understandable. I mean, obviously you want to fall off, but she is a once-in-a-lifetime type of star. Certainly once in a couple of decades, you know, that you look at. So Prairie fought Jackson State hard, but Jackson State has found the keys, at least at home we can see, in terms of good quality teams where they get the win. So kudos for Jackson State. They picked off where they left off, making it to the championship game. Couldn't quite get it done, but it looks like they're well on their way there. A lot of people say not too early. I understand that, but I'm just saying, as we look at week to week where teams are, because we want to give you those types of updates in terms of what's going on in the landscape. So that's the SWAC. Got anything for the MEAC?
Yeah, MEAC, they announced their men's basketball honors, and senior forward Jabri Blunt, son of Mel, of North Carolina Central. And sophomore center Brendan Medley Bacon of Compton State. They've been selected as this week's MEAC co-players of the week. And Medley Bacon also reaps the league's defensive player of the week. Let me give you the numbers on Jabri Blunt, the forward, 6'7" from Pittsburgh. He averaged 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists as the Eagles defeated Bethune-Cookman on Saturday before falling to FAMU this past Monday. But Jabri had a 29-point, 10-rebound effort in the win over Bethune-Cookman. And for the week, he shot 60% from the field, 78% from the free throw line. Medley Bacon, he is a 7'1" sophomore from Baltimore. He led the Compton State Eagles to victory over North Carolina, shooting 63% from the floor, 83% from the line, 19 points while snatching 14 rebounds in the win over North Carolina A&T. So huge night for Medley.
I was surprised about that one.
Very surprised
when you saw that North Carolina A&T.
Didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, getting that L, if you would. Charles Eben, let me give him a shout out. He's jumped in here and checking us out. The voice there, getting it done in radio land for Alcorn State Braves, doing great work, and does some work for the SWAC baseball time a lot of times, and get us that information for those fans that like to dig back in and see baseball.
He does a tremendous
if you can't
job.
get there early, he's one of the ears and eyes for us that can't be there, so I appreciate him. He continues to do great work. But you just broke down the MEAC, SWAC. Anything you want to share, the SIAC, CIAA, I know they're in full gear. We'll get into some big-time information as we start to see them separate themselves as the programs over there are doing well. What are your thoughts in terms of what's going on in the SIAC and CIAA?
CIAA with the women, the Lincoln, Pennsylvania. They
look out!
They
for real?
They for real. They have
for real.
Yeah, a young lady who's the leading scorer in the conference, but that was an impressive win this past week. 20-point win over Virginia Union. So,
right, who's been the cream of the crop in that conference, still playing solid.
Right.
But you put a 20 spot.
You put a 20 spot on.
In terms of difference in your win?
Exactly.
That's a real deal. Top 25 caliber team, as you're talking about what they're getting it done in a lot of ways. Kudos for Lincoln. Coming out of nowhere for some people.
Right.
They don't follow the CIAA like that, but kudos for what's going over there.
Sure.
What about the men's side?
Well, on the men's side, you got Bowie State continue to do what they do over there, but I tell you what, I wanted to turn my attention back to the women, especially in the MEAC. I wanted to give kudos to Morgan State as they were able to knock off North Carolina A&T's women and snap their 28-game conference winning streak. So kudos to Morgan State for getting that done this past weekend.
Yes, want to mention that we're going to be looking at Coach Clarence Stubblefield, getting him in the studio next week.
Okay.
Working on that. Really excited about what he's done in the city in terms of his hours. And then even before that, as we really want to dig into some of that HBCU history, Prairie View having a national champion coming in here, as he was part of that team that won the NAIA championship in 1962. Prairie View getting it done in so many ways, doing 62, 63 years when he was down there on the hill coming in. So really excited about getting him in the studio. So we'll check back on that. It looks like we should be able to get that done in a lot of ways. Today you heard MLK Junior Community Music Center of Houston's 36th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Junior Music Tribute Concert. Boy, that ought to be nice. As you talk about Sunday, January 2019, a lot of history was going on there. And that program is people celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. For myself and Charles, we talk about brother Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As his holiday was yesterday, so we wanted to make sure that we celebrate that and bring that information up. What do you got for the SIAC?
SIAC, they continue to get it done. On the SIAC, I kind of look at the women's side of the ledger a little bit. Yeah. A few surprises over there, so you know, I was rushing to get over here. I left my notes.
Yeah, I know you used to break down scores. Yeah. Just give us a little updates where they are record-wise, teams to watch. As you talk about those top teams, we'll look at it both on the women's side a little bit and then on the men's side in terms of what's going on in the basketball world there. Obviously, don't want to stick too long to this, but you had the little fisticuffs. Lemoyne Owens seems to always be in the middle of that. I don't know quite what's going on there. Yeah. Obviously, we won't spend a lot of time on that. But I know on the men's side, you look at Albany State at 8-2 in the conference thus far, sitting at 11-8. So you see the side, Tuskegee. Right there with Miles, it looks like that's going to be matchup 8-2, 7-2 respectively in terms of conference records. So tied in the loss column with Miles getting that big victory over Tuskegee early in the season, but you have Tuskegee overall record sitting at 11-6, and Miles with just 3 losses, only playing 15 games, so they're 12-3 when you talk about that. But that's where you have the early season race. Don't want to leave out Clark Atlanta. While they're just 6-10 overall in the season, did play a formidable non-conference, but in regards to on the conference schedule, they're 6-2, so tied with Albany State that has risen to the occasion. With Morehouse, they got it done last year, struggling with 6 conference losses in the SIAC.
Yeah, a little surprised with Morehouse. I wasn't expecting for them to kind of tail off the way they have thus far, but yeah, it's been kind of a tough road for Morehouse.
Yeah, what about the women's side in terms of the SIAC? You got a little something over there?
Yeah, continue to look at the standings over there. You take a look at what Tuskegee has been able to do over there on the western side, and kind of keeping an eye out for Miles in terms of what they've been able to do thus far. So on the SIAC, the women, you know, they continue to fight it out this first quarter part of the season, and just kind of taking a look at what the teams are doing over there. It's been kind of a dogfight thus far. So.
Certainly, with Miles sitting at 10-5, overall 6-2, as you mentioned, them fighting it out with Tuskegee 6-3 at the top of the conference at 10-8 overall. So you have Tuskegee a half game behind Miles, sitting up there, you know, 2 games back of Miles, but still in the race of Central State and Spring Hill. Just to give a little indication of what's going on in the West, as you mentioned. In the East, you have Benedict that just has 1 loss.
1 loss.
Really solid. You know, Benedict has been a solid women's program on a particularly in the sport of basketball, as we talk about now, and they continue to get it done. They're 15-2 overall, so they've got it done outside of the conference, and obviously getting it done inside the conference with just one loss, 7-1 in the conference race. 3 games up by the next nearest competition, who are all have 4 losses. Payne, Savannah State, Fort Valley State sitting with 4 losses. Payne has the 5 wins, while both of Savannah State and Fort Valley are even at 500, just to give you a little something there.
1 loss to Miles. That was back in November. So 1 point loss to Miles. So it's one to keep an eye on with Benedict. Yeah,
they are playing some really good basketball in terms of what's going on there. So give me a little more insight as you got a chance to go to Jackson and see those games. You had the matchup Saturday. You told a little bit of the insight in terms of the women's side. So let's go and focus on the men's side.
Yeah.
What did you see on the men's side in regards to in terms of Texas Southern? Obviously, they had that tough loss that Monday night, and everybody was kind of ready to run Texas Southern off and saying, finally. Yeah. Then they come back that Saturday against their rival, get a really big win. Matchup went back and forth, played really well on the defensive side. I think surprised a lot of folks. People probably came into the game thinking Prairie View was going to have their way, particularly with what you just saw Texas Southern do that previous Monday. About to be, a rivalry game. They got it done. But then in a lot of ways you say that, well, this is a rivalry win. They played up one big game. Tariq Armstrong, the guard, was out, but he comes back against Jackson State. And so you're saying, well, let's see what happens against Jackson State. We know Jackson State was at least solid. They've had some pretty solid win, but they had some tough losses too that you're trying to figure out when you talk about that Alcorn team that's won 3 in a row. That's one of the inexplicable when you talk about the fact they lost to Jackson State at home, double-digit loss in a lot of ways. But that particular matchup with Jackson State, I thought that Texas Southern methodologically just broke Jackson State down, and I was surprised about it on the men's side. What are your thoughts?
I was just surprised about it on the men's side as well. Jackson State men's basketball right now is an enigma. You don't know what sort of team that you're going to get night in, night out. They're the same team that could go to Alcorn and get a huge win, but they are also the same team that you see them go through lulls where they go through 3-4 minute lulls where they just can't score. And Texas Southern, I thought, took advantage of that. Bryson Etienne, we've seen his confidence grow in terms of his ball handling and his shooting when Tariq Armstrong was out, but he goes for a career night, 27 points against Jackson State. And once he starts to see a couple of balls fall, he's a difficult individual to deal with. So you have Bryson Etienne, who had a career night, and then you have Texas Southern's inside game that I think a lot of people kind of keep an eye on with them, but they rebound the ball very, very tough with guys like Eden Ewing, Daniel Baldwin, Yahuza Rosas. All 3 of those guys really give you a difficult, tough go of it inside the paint. So they rebound the ball. They really do a heck of a job offensive rebounds and whatnot. But Jackson State just had a very tough time in terms of a matchup against Texas Southern. Tariq Armstrong really offensively wasn't that much of a factor. And, he brings 14 points a night to Texas Southern. But Bryson Etienne, he saw the first 2 or 3 balls fall. And Justin Hopkins is another guy out there on the wing. Utility guy, gives you a lot of stuff, both on the offense and defensive end of the ball. But, he can knock down an open jumper. He can go get you a rebound. He'll steal a ball for you. He'll play lockdown defense on Jackson State's best scorer, Tristan Jarrett. So Texas Southern, that was a total win against Jackson State.
Yeah, it's talking about a rivalry. You have Alcorn that has been playing really well of late. Talk about that matchup in terms of what they've done in basketball, and what do you see in this team? Obviously, you throw in that confounding loss, but you talk about stats-wise, scoring-wise, they're getting it done in a lot of ways, top of the conference in terms of what they get done. So they can score the ball.
They can score the ball.
But that confounding loss to Jackson State? Do you just throw that up to a rivalry game?
It's a rivalry game. It's a surprising loss, especially losing to Jackson State at home. But because we've seen what they can do, especially against a tough Texas Southern team. Balls are falling, they're going to give you fits, and we saw it this past week. They had a SWAC Player of the Week. I mean, he was 9 of 12 from three-point land in both of those games this past weekend. So Alcorn, and we talked about it when we were watching them. You know, they're a scrappy team that can give a team fits, especially once they start seeing a few of those three balls fall. And they have been one of the hotter teams in the conference in terms of not being one of those teams that just goes through lulls, you know, where they can't score. So,
right,
you know, they're a fun team.
Other than that first 10 minutes of the start of the conference race
yeah,
against Prairie View.
Against Prairie, right.
But outside of that, I mean, they've been cooking with grease in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a rivalry matchup. I did want to make sure we get this. We did a little bit about the CIAA SIAC, but we have one of those cross-conference rivalry games with Benedict taking on Claflin. Which should be fascinating, and that is a Thursday matchup for both the men's and women's. Obviously, we talked about how talented the Benedict Lady Tigers are in terms of what goes on that side. But wanted to make sure we gave some love between the CIAA and the SIEC in terms of that rival with Claflin facing up against Benedict, both on the men's and women's in terms of that matchup. Any thoughts in terms of that?
I mean, Benedict has been a stalwart in terms of what they've been able to do in the SIAC for the past few years. So 7-1 in conference play, 9 in a row. I don't expect things to change too much in terms of what they are able to do. But Benedict has been one of those teams that you always look toward over there in the SIAC that really gets it done.
Exactly. So we're going to shift back into the SWAC a little bit before we get into some MEAC and some numbers that came out this weekend, and then we'll give you some updates on these polls, if you would, in terms of the top 5 for women's side, see what changes are going on there. Not a lot of changes, but some changes in terms of rankings of the team, so I'm sure you'll be interested to see what comes out there. And then what's going on in terms of the men's side will be interesting as well. When you talk about Claflin, you're going to have to pay respects to Jackson that had 25 points in terms of Claflin when they faced up against Winston. So I'm really interested in terms of what's going on there in that particular matchup. But Prairie View and Grambling. Grambling's men's team and women's team are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
We thought maybe there would be a little drop off for the women's side, but in a lot of ways, what took place, non-conference, solid wins for Grambling. What they had coming back, obviously they played a very tough part of their schedule. 2 at home to the Texas schools, if you would, has to be tough, and that was both on the men's and women's side. So it was doubly painful when you literally go 0 for 4 over the weekend, essentially, in conference play. What are your thoughts in terms of the Grambling State Tigers?
Well, obviously we lost to Texas Southern Monday night, but going back to Saturday night against Prairie View, 64-57 loss. The loss to Prairie View Saturday night. Prairie View has an 18-4 quarter. against Grambling. So they're finding it kind of tough to score right now. They have young lady Justice Coleman. She's getting about 13 points a game for them, and Candace Paramore. She's averaging about 10 points for the Grambling Lady Tigers. But it was a cold shooting 4 games now for Grambling. So we'll see if they can kind of turn that going forward.
Yeah, we'll talk about that rivalry game between Alabama State and Alabama A&M. That was a Huntsville home game, but they played in Birmingham in terms of that.
I wonder what's the dynamic to that in terms of.
I think it's understanding that both teams have huge fan base in Birmingham, and so I think they're trying to capture a little bit of Magic City classic magic, which I don't necessarily see as bad. Obviously, you're going to have to really put in some marketing for it. And so I don't necessarily disagree with the idea, but hopefully they're putting in the marketing that's necessary to see what could be successful in trying to create that. Remember, they do it in baseball with the last couple of years, so they'll switch off, which each team has every other year, one of the team forgives their home game to play it in Birmingham so for the matchup. The other part of it is they were doing some reconstruction on the gym, Elmore Gym. I know that's what it was last year, and so that may be the same thing, that they haven't finished the construction on the Elmore Gym to some degree. I knew that was one of the reasons they looked at doing it last year. So follow up a little deeper in terms of what's going on there. Roland Austin Wendell, brothers Roland Austin and brother Wendell Davis have joined us, checking us out, giving us some support there. But in terms of that matchup, Alabama State gets it done. Alabama A&M were coming in thinking they were going to be able to take another step towards being more competitive. In the first weekend, they did really well, and you talked about going on the road, coming home getting a win, but then they have not been able to get over that loss to Mississippi Valley, it seems like, which is certainly a tough loss. With everybody thought that's one you could count on, particularly at home.
Yeah.
Kudos to the Valley for making sure that they got off the turf, because people had basically buried them in a lot of ways. So you talk about that. What are your thoughts in terms of what's going on with the Bulldogs, Alabama A&M, Alabama State, and you can sneak in a little bit with Valley there?
Yeah, a surprising step back for Alabama A&M. You saw them go on the road at Jackson State. It kind of takes the luster off that win on the road a little bit when you kind of take a step back when you've had losses now, Mississippi Valley and Alabama State. So, I thought that might be kind of one of those up-and-coming teams in terms of kind of keeping an eye on them, but they've taken a step back over the past weekend and a half now. So tough for them, and like you said, kudos to Lindsey Hunter with Mississippi Valley getting their first victory of the season.
Yeah, big deal. Lindsey Hunter said, "Hey, man, slow down."
Yeah.
Then he played a tough one the other night, too. Couldn't quite get the victory. Roland says, PV for the win again. I said, what I said. Check the tape. TSU should have been a different outcome. I think TSU got it done. They do got to come to Baby Dome, so, you get the other chance to get a little rematch. And the way it's playing out, it don't surprise me if you go to Birmingham and you see those two teams in a championship matchup again to see who makes the NCAA tournament. That would be fascinating.
I can see that outcome totally playing out. They're both 4-1 in conference play thus far. But watch out for Alcorn. They're a really intriguing team to me, the way they can play basketball.
I certainly think that you have to watch out for them. And then I think the other ones you have to keep your eye on now would be looking at Jackson State and Southern.
Yeah.
Southern was the next team I was going to ask you to jump out at. You have Israel Holmes jumping in here and checking us out as we give some of this SWAC love. Last thing, talk about Southern a little bit in terms of them being able to get some big victories of late, particularly at home, to see if they can start pushing things in a different direction.
Yeah, well, it started off with a good Monday night win over Jackson State, 56-50. Then they go on the road this past weekend and get it done with the UAPB Mississippi Valley road trip. Nice win at Arkansas Pine Bluff. Arkansas Pine Bluff is one of the better defensive teams in the league. 20-point win over Arkansas Pine Bluff. And
you see they're missing a little bit of that scoring power they had the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And then, we often talk about Monday nights being the night to kind of look for upsets. And Mississippi Valley was right around.
Yeah, they were sneaking around the chicken coop.
Chicken coop, exactly. Prairie View, the same thing on the women's side against Jackson State.
Yeah.
In fact, I said that might be Jackson State's first loss, but kudos to Jackson State for getting the win.
Especially after coming off a tough overtime win, emotional win,
right. Mm-hmm.
One that you're focusing on. Great point that you make that. George Suggs checking in. Appreciate you, George, getting in here and giving us some love in terms of what's going on. Let's go over to. Unless you want to point anybody up, let's go over to the MEAC. Let's see what's going on the MEAC side in terms of that. But before I do that, I want to give some love to Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. Some of the games going on then when you had the men's teams, as you have teams like Dillard and Tougaloo receiving votes in terms of the top 25 NAIA programs. You had Dillard. Was at Tougaloo, and Tougaloo took it to Dillard 95-82. Yeah, Edward Waters, as they making their transition, still playing conference games in the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. They played College of Coastal Georgia, winning that game 77-68, still representing for the GCAC. Another one is number 15 ranked Xavier continues to be solid as they get it down and trounce Suno. Obviously, we've heard everything about Suno, what they're going on. Athletics is certainly not one of the highest things on their radar right now, but you had Xavier at Suno 73-44 as Xavier really takes out some punishment on it. Let's give some love to the women. You had Tougaloo also beat Dillard as they hosted the Dillard women's basketball program, winning that game 62-59. And you had Xavier on the women's side getting it done against Suno again. So you have a lot of these sweeps on men's and women's, with Xavier winning 86-76, just to give you some kudos going on then. That was Monday's game. Past Saturday's game had Edward Waters at Rust. Edward Waters takes us to Rust, winning 80-74. You had Talladega at Philander Smith, and this is a 20th ranked Talladega team at that time before the votes came out on Monday. They win 89-83 against Philander Smith, but however they drop out of the poll. Tough thing like that when you get a win, but that means they lost earlier in that week, as you could imagine. You had Tougaloo. Talladega's rank is Tougaloo that's receiving votes. Tougaloo was at Suno, winning 82-57. On the women's side, you had Edward Waters at Rust, but Rust gets it done against those Edward Water Tigers. On the women's side, winning 79-67. You have Talladega getting it done over Philander Smith, and on the women's side, Talladega's ranked number 11. Trying to get in that top 10 naturally. NIA doing a lot of great work in terms of what's going on there. You have some hot news off the press that you want to give us after I give you this last score with Talladega beating Philander Smith 79-64, just to give you some of those big time matchups going on in the GCAC. What do you have for us?
UAPB, they are set to announce their new director of athletics. It looks like it's going to be Chris Peterson. Chris Peterson is the former director of athletics at University of Arkansas Little Rock.
And it doesn't surprise me. They do some different stuff over there at Arkansas Pine Bluff, and that's as president there. He's fraternity brother, so we can see what's interesting there. Arkansas Little Rock. When you talk about Arkansas Little Rock basketball program, don't have a football program, right?
Basketball program has been one of the better programs, I think, in their conference.
So it'll be interesting to see, is he going to make a lot of changes? Is he going to be able to get more financial support in that program?
That's the thing that you always are concerned about going forward in terms of the financial support that a new person comes in and to kind of bring that enthusiasm with them. So.
You biting your lip over there. Anything else?
Head coach Lane. Lane named a new head football coach, and this is
Isaiah. He just go look at the. Okay.
Byron Brown. He's this former offense coordinator at Grambling. He's going to be taking over he'll be the head man over at Lane. So, yeah.
Oh, you like that, huh?
I mean, they play Texas College, so yeah.
He found a way to get Texas College in the mix. That was pretty good. I like that.
I like that.
Snuck that in there pretty well. Terry, let's get in here to the MEAC play in terms of what's going on in the MEAC. Norfolk State on the men's side, really solid in terms of what they're doing. They continue to get it done. Surprising loss by North Carolina A&T this week.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts in terms of what's going on in the MEAC? We'll get into some particular matchups shortly here, but just general thoughts overall. What do you think going on?
South Carolina State, they're the surprise to me over there in the MEAC. Norfolk State continues.
Good call. Good call.
They continue to do what they do, 4-0 in conference play, and with Norfolk State, there never seems to be, a score, a 20-point score. It's a bunch of people scoring for them. Normally a team effort, 4-0 in league play. South Carolina State, they're surprised, and they're right there at 4-1. We had the loss this past week from North Carolina A&T. They're 4-1 in conference play. And Bethune-Cookman right up there at 3-2. But I don't know. I just keep waiting on North Carolina Central to kind of make that push.
Woo, but they had a tough weekend this weekend.
Tough weekend, yeah. Tough weekend.
As they did get the win over Bethune-Cookman on Saturday, but they had a tough loss on Monday. You had South Carolina State, as you said, over FAMU. That was an 81-65 score. The North Carolina Central win over Bethune-Cookman was 86-59. Coppin State had the big win of the weekend, 0-4 coming in there, slumping. We talked about having them ranked as high as number 2 in the preseason with 4 D1 wins, but they came in conference play and just could not get it done. We were trying to figure it out. Well, they get the big upset, if you would. It was at home, but they beat a formerly undefeated, at least in conference play,
A&T.
Aggie team, North Carolina A&T, that obviously seems to have everything going their way. Coppin State defeats them 79-75. Close victory that they get to pull out, and credit for them. Morgan State over Howard 68-58. That Howard team is struggling, getting out there trying to do some recruiting as they landed a big man the other day that I saw. But right now, you can see that loss of their big-time score from last year is giving them fits in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they've lost 8 in a row.
So they are struggling, to say the least. You have Norfolk State over Maryland Eastern Shore, 62-52. Obviously, Maryland Eastern Shore is struggling big time with just 2 wins on the season themselves. But you see Norfolk State find a way just to get victory. Entering with Norfolk State, they haven't played many of those Saturday, Monday type games over the early part of the schedule. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that affects them in terms of the latter part of the season when they start playing some of these Saturday, Mondays, anything going on there. In terms of Monday, you had the nice matchup between Yale and Howard. We talked about it a little bit last year when Howard went to Yale. This year, Yale came down to Howard in that matchup, which is interesting. 89-75 for a team that's not playing very well. Bison seem at least rise to the occasion to make it interesting to some degree. FAMU gets the win. This is a FAMU team that seems to to get some solid wins, but they can't stretch them together, and then they'll lose to a team that you think maybe they should beat. So they do beat North Carolina Central 66-57 in a surprise win for a lot of people. Central has quietly stayed up in the top of the conference race, but you think Central, the Eagles, will always find a way to get it done. Turn of time, you don't want to see them because they rise to the occasion there. But struggling a little bit out of the box of the season, even though they're still at the top of the conference, just in terms of some of the losses they've had early. You get South Carolina State, as you said, they continue to get it done. They get the win over Maryland Eastern Shore. We already talked about the struggles of Maryland Eastern Shore, but South Carolina State is doing what you're supposed to. And with the win, they become over 500. They had 9-8, which is something to be said in terms of the overall record, which keeps things interesting. And then North Carolina A&T bounces back and gets a solid win over Morgan State, another one of those enigma teams, similar to the Rattlers, has some big wins, tough losses, so you don't quite quite know where they are in terms of the scope of things. But North Carolina goes on the road, a tough place to win now in Baltimore, no matter what you say about how they're playing overall. But North Carolina A&T, to their credit, the Aggies bounce back and get that victory 76-70, and this is obviously on the men's side. Talk a little bit about the MEAC on the men's side with those victories, in particular some of those games and matchups. What did you see going on in those games this past weekend?
Well, as I mentioned before, South Carolina State, they're the kind of the surprise team to me over there. Wins Ed Howard, and then they take care of business thus far at home with wins over Florida A&M and Maryland Eastern Shore. But the wins out of conference, and Jimmy's real big on the wins out of conference. They got wins over UNC Asheville. They got wins over Presbyterian. And then you see there's a couple of games in there where things kind of got away, but they're a solid team, 4-1 thus far in conference play. The team, Florida A&M, you just mentioned they're a little bit of an enigma team. They'll have a couple losses and they'll get one that you didn't expect for them to get, and it's like, okay, didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, so that's one of the teams that you hate to see in the tournament. Because they have some talent.
They got some talent.
And it means if they get a good shooting night, they're going to play well and play some defense.
Yeah.
And they're the type of team that you figure probably won't win 3-4 games in a row. But they certainly one that can knock one of those teams that you are expecting to be able to win 3 or 4 in a row.
Right.
They can give them the exit boot real early. So those are the headache type rattlers. You're talking about striking you.
Strike at the right time.
And then you talk about last week. They're still talking about a little all over there in Rattler Country with the transfer quarterback coming in.
Yeah.
So
football is never too far off the mind. All these Southern teams, but and that's something that we've kind of talked about.
Throw that in,
especially and you see all the chatter now on social media is about the recruiting season. It's open season for recruiting season, and I guess it kind of came across my mind this weekend because you kind of take a look at the crowds around some of the basketball games, and the crowds aren't what they should be. I will say, Jackson State women versus Texas Southern, the arena was electric. That was a little different.
So what does that tell you?
Winning brings people to the arena,
right? But also think about what those teams did in non-conference schedule. Both of those teams were able to get some solid non-conference Division I wins. So you had some expectation about what those teams would come back. You had Cooper coming in. Obviously, Texas Southern, her reputation about building programs. So you kind of keep your eyes on that. Jackson State, obviously, on the women's side, people were expected to see if they can get over the hump. They made it to the championship game. Then they get some Division I wins non-conference. So you say, see, we told you those are pretty decent, solid teams. Keep your eyes on them. You keep piquing your interest. Then all of a sudden they get in the conference race. They roll off some wins. They're playing good. So all of a sudden now you got this big matchup coming in. 2 undefeated teams, one coming in at 3-0, the other one coming on 4-0, and everybody says, this is something I want to see.
Yeah.
So in basketball, you have to provide the matchups. Some of it you can't control in terms of undefeated teams, but some of it you can control to make sure when you have these solid teams that they do well in non-conference play, and you start paying attention to them, and you got to make sure that you market what's out there. I mean, you wanted to market the fact that Texas Southern was coming in with a top 5 program. Jackson State was a top 5 program according to these different polls. So you want to put that kind of stuff out there, and obviously didn't do that. But imagine if you even market even more about those teams coming in undefeated than was out there, and you could see the type of fan base you get, the electric atmosphere that you talked about. So great point when you talk about what's out there. Let me go on the women's side, the MEAC, as we talk about this a little bit. You have Bethune-Cookman at home defeating North Carolina Central. Again, this is on the women's side, 73-52. North Carolina A&T, the women defeat Coppin State 84-38. Just beat them up there. 40-point win, plus win. Wow. FAMU defeats South Carolina State 44-39. You have Morgan State over Howard 74-67, and you have Norfolk State, the women, continue just to run roughshod on a lot of teams, doing what they're supposed to do against Maryland Eastern Shore. This is Maryland Eastern Shore that played really good basketball last year, struggled a little bit this year, 68-45, which it looks like A&T will have a lot of teams feel like they're struggling. So you have North Carolina Central bounces back on the women's side against FAMU 71-70. That's in overtime. You have South Carolina State over Maryland Eastern Shore 60-55, and you have Morgan State defeating North Carolina A&T on the women's side. A bit of an upset for a lot of people, 42-38 in terms of what's going on there. Talk about the women's basketball programs in the MEAC and what's going on there. What are your thoughts in terms of some of those matchups?
Should be very interesting going forward, especially with those top 3 or 4 teams in the MEAC: Norfolk State, North Carolina A&T, and Bethune-Cookman. Norfolk State undefeated thus far in conference play, but A&T, Bethune-Cookman, even Morgan State, they're all right there with 1 and 2 losses thus far going forward. But Norfolk State, they won 4 in a row, but keep an eye out on Bethune-Cookman. They've got 4 in a row as well.
I want to call your attention on the women's side to a matchup next week. Bethune-Cookman 12-5 overall, travels to Greensboro. North Carolina A&T 12-5 overall, so that's going to be an interesting matchup for me in a lot of ways in terms of those two teams. What's going on? What do you think is key to that particular matchup on the women's side for two teams at the top of the conference?
First and foremost, North Carolina A&T, they're undefeated at home. 5-0 thus far, playing at home. I think playing in the cozy confines kind of gives them a little bit of an edge. So, and they've been playing very consistent ball over the past 10 games. They're 8-2 of the last 10 games.
Good call in terms of those types of matchups. Any other matchups? MEAC, SWAC, Gulf Coast Athletic Conference, SIAC, CIAA that you want to call our attention to in terms of what's going on out there?
GCAC. Watching Tougaloo, Dillard, and Talladega, all 3 of those teams are averaging over 80 points, if I'm not mistaken. So on the men's side of the ball. So watching those 3 fight it out for supremacy in the GCAC, that's going to be real fun to watch going forward.
I like what you call it right there. That's a big call in terms of what's going on that next week. Don't have any really key matchups with two teams doing well this week, a matchup on the men's side and the SWAC. And so it'll be interesting to kind of keep what eye and a note on that. Let me jump in here and give you the top 5, and we can come back and close it out on some points that you might want to make in terms of what's going on there. Give you that moment to do that in terms of what's going on there. Varick has joined us. Give him a little love. Shout out there as we tease some things there. In the women's part, no team dropped out. Hampton Lady Pirates sitting around with 2 big wins this past weekend. They improved with 19 points, sitting at 10-7, 6-2, receiving votes just outside of the top 5. Top 5 programs in terms of week number 3, HBCU Major Division. Yeah, Bethune-Cookman Lady Wildcats sit at 12-5, 4-1. They were ranked number 5 last week, so they stay there with 47 points. Number 4, North Carolina A&T State Aggies sit at 12-5, 4-1 in terms of the conference race, 71 points. They were 3. They dropped 1 spot with that loss last week. At number 3, Texas Southern Tigers 9-7, 4-1. They drop as well. They still have 1 first place vote that they were able to hang on to, although they had that overtime loss to the undefeated, if you would, Lady Tigers. They have 82 points. Bringing us to number 2, a new number 2 team this week. Jackson State Lady Tigers sit at 8-8. They get to the 500 mark, 6-0 in terms of conference record. 3 first place vote as they add 2 of them. They have 93 points, and they move all the way up 2 spots from number 4 to sit at number 2 this week with the big win they had over Texas Southern Tigers. At number 1, you have Norfolk State Sports 10-7 and 4-0 as they like to use in terms of their nickname. 6 first place votes, 106 points, remain at number 1 as they continue to get it done. What are your thoughts in terms of top 5 teams in Dr. Cavil's Inside HBCU Huddle Report for Dr. Cavil's 2020 HBCU Major Division Women's Basketball Poll Ranking in week number 3.
Obviously, I got an opportunity to watch Jackson State up close, and they are a very, very solid basketball team. A lot of times with the women, I like to look at the inside play where you can get easy buckets down low, and Jackson State definitely has that this year with Marnisha Hamer on one side of the block, Misha Williams on the other side of the block, and they really give you fits in terms of what they can do, especially offensive rebounding. I think that's huge going forward.
How would they match up against Norfolk State Spartans or North Carolina A&T State Aggies?
I think it would be tough in terms of Norfolk State or North Carolina A&T. I just think on the MEAC side of the ledger, or on the East Coast, if you will, just a little bit better basketball is played over there. The talent, especially at the guard play, I think is a little different than what we see in the SWAC for the most part. So I think that Norfolk State would definitely give Jackson State all that they can handle on that side.
Oh, interesting. No, you didn't say. Receiving votes on the men's side. South Carolina State Bulldogs 9-2, 30-3 in terms of their records, and Alcorn State Braves 8-9, 4-2. They go on a little win spree, but can't quite jump into the top 5. Those 2 conference losses are really affecting them a little bit in terms of that. They sit with 51 and 44 points respectively, looking into the top 5. At number 5. You have North Carolina A&T State Aggies 8-12, 4-1. They find a way to stay in the top 5 with 53 points. They do drop all the way from number 2, but they find a way to stay in the poll this week. At number 4, Prairie View A&M Panthers. They were 5. They bounced back from the loss they had against Texas Southern a couple of weeks ago and win 2 on the road. So they improved to 8-10 overall, 4-1 in the conference race. They have 1 first place vote in regards to the overall ranking. They sit at 60 points at number 4. Bringing us to number 3. Texas Southern Tigers sit at 10-11, 4-1, 3 first place votes, 81 points. Move up 1 spot for number 4 as they sit in the proverbial 3 spot. At number 2, you have the Norfolk State Spartans sit at 8-11, 4-0 in the conference race. Out of the MEAC, 3 first place votes, 93 points. They move up a spot from number 3. And number 1 remains Tennessee State Tigers. They split this weekend, 12-7, 4-2 in OVC. They do lose some more first place votes, so you see some chinks in the armor as they can't quite sweep in terms of the conference race of OVC. And they had a tough loss this weekend as they were at home. Couldn't quite get it done down the stretch. 104 points, but they remain at number 1. It looks like you have some competition with Norfolk State, Texas Southern, seeing what they can do to see if they can overtake Tennessee State Tigers. Tigers are going to have to find a way to get some more conference wins. Or all those wins in non-conference is not going to do real much other than to look pretty for the record.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the top 5 programs on the men's side?
I can't argue much with the top 5 programs on the men's side. Tennessee State is...
Dr. Cavil doing his thing.
I think Tennessee
Can't
State...
say much to Dr. Cavil.
I looked at that Tennessee State...
Because Dr. Cavil is the man to be.
You called it on this one. But Norfolk State, thus far, they're 4-0 in conference play. They haven't really, and watch Jimmy jump me on this, they haven't really been tested yet, I don't think, because they played Howard, Coppin State, if I'm not mistaken, some teams that are down in the lower echelon of the MEAC. So watching Norfolk State going forward, we'll see what they're about. North Carolina A&T, good call. Prairie View and Texas Southern, to me, they're going to be the 2 teams slugging it out for the most part. In the
I like the way you said it, slugging it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already looking forward to the trip to the Hill when Texas Southern goes to Prairie View to take on the Panthers.
Yeah, we'll be down there. We'll be in the house. We'll be over there. See if I can get me some front row seats. Check it out. You know, I want to be close to the action. Shout out to Dr. Roderick Holmes checking us out today. Brother Wendell Davis, he said, good show, bros. Appreciate you. Lawrence D. White is checking us out to give some love in terms of what's going on in the house and the place to be. Any other thoughts you have going in terms of the basketball Ramball this weekend? Or this past week?
Great action this past weekend. If I'm not mistaken, all the road teams got victories this weekend. Road teams were 9-0 in the SWAC. I'm not sure when I've seen that. I think it's probably happened before, but all the
I like that. Good catch.
Road teams were 9-0 this past weekend, so it shows that teams can get on the road and get it done. Texas Southern, very impressive versus Jackson State and Grambling. We thought Jackson State Grambling would be that tough 2-game stretch in the conference, but
yeah, certainly
Texas Southern
not to be
and handled their business quite well. Going to be interesting this upcoming weekend. Jackson State and Grambling, 2 teams on the men's side of the ledger. They're both struggling, so I think that's going to be
both teams need that win.
They need that win.
Who's at home for that?
Jackson State. Jackson State is hosting. Yes.
Yeah, being at home, you really need that.
Boy, Rob Calloway, host of the HBCU Report, and right now, you're inside the HBCU Sports Lab with my guy. All hail the dean of HBCU Sports. You know I know. Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, my guy. What's happening, man?
What's happening, man? What you say?
Hey, I started to get a commercial with Tamika Reed this past weekend, but I held off.
Don't do that, man. Show your boy some love.
Yes, it did.
So, last thing I have for you, any other thing that you want to add before we close it off?
Great, like I said, great action this past weekend. It was really enjoyable to be in the house with Texas Southern and Jackson State.
Dr. Roderick.
I appreciate Texas Southern allowing me to broadcast with the legendary Chatterbox and whatnot, and that was a lot of fun to be able to do that game with him. And tremendously exciting women's basketball game with Texas Southern and Jackson State. That was really in an environment that I had not seen in the Lee Williams Athletics and Assembly Center probably since the Trey Johnson days.
We need some more of those.
Yeah, we really do. We really need some more of those to get some of those type games in the SWAC.
That'll do it. This is Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, presented by Amber Slaughter, the project architect. Amber Slaughter, the project architect, where they handle the project planning, project development, project execution, and team management so you can run your business. Contact Amber Slaughter, the project architect, at www.theprojectarchitect.com to schedule an appointment. That is www.theprojectarchitect.com. To schedule an appointment. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As we come to a close, we hope you enjoyed our lecture today as we got the music. Oh, yeah. Appreciate you, Charles. It make me feel warm and fuzzy. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is on the road, taking care of some business there. Every Tuesday, you can listen to us 6 to 7 right here on KCUH 1230 AM, Houston, Texas. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DrKenyattaCavil. Again, that's DrKenyattaCavil. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Course lecture dismissed.